So, welcome to this conversation on trauma informed coaching. My name is Raynell, and with me is Reva. And we really wanted to inform the community on what trauma informed coaching is and maybe touch on some of the nuances of how we each approach this work of coaching with the lens of being trauma informed. So I wanted to first introduce myself and then I'll hand it off to Reva. My name again is Raynell and my business is Reno Consulting Solutions. I call it a nature-based coaching and consulting firm where we're taking really the wisdom of nature and using that as a tool for guiding ourselves back into our wholeness. You can find me at renoconsultingsolutions.com. On Instagram, I'm at Hike It Out Coaching. You might find some of the cool things I'm doing with healing hikes, which are now also virtual healing hikes. And so I work with a lot of diverse leaders in the social sector and working on leadership, self-care and wellness, and healing. Um, Let me hand it off to Reva for her
Yeah,
introduction.
thanks so much, Raynell. I'm excited to be here with you. My name's Reva. I'm also a coach, executive coach, facilitator, consultant. And in my work, I help social impact leaders tap into their courage to lean into things that are uncomfortable so they can do what really matters. And I also help them build cultures in their teams and organizations that help their whole organizations take on big challenges. Um, and you can find me at greatergoodcoaching.org. Connect with me on LinkedIn. And yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Beautiful. Now we met through Leader Spring, and we just finished a series of coaching calls, workshop style presentations called Coach's Insight. And this conversation about wanting to talk about trauma informed care came from some of our organizing and recognizing, oh man, this is such a important topic. And being two women of color coaches being a very important piece of why we wanted to drive some more deeper conversation about it. So just to let you know how we got connected and how we want to even just continue supporting our communities is really offering you this content and things to think about. Maybe you are searching for a coach, or maybe you're a coach wanting to know more about being trauma informed and how that looks like in our work. So we'll cover on a number of topics around being trauma informed coach. So I first want to present to you or ask you. So you talked about who you coach.
Mhm.
Maybe you can speak to, from your perspective or your purpose, why you coach.
Mm. I mean, honestly, the honest answer, the reason I coach is because I love coaching. I love, I just love the kind of interactions where we're both people, we're both just trying to get at the truth, right? I think
Mm,
um, I really love to know the truth, and I love helping people find that truth for themselves because it's always, even when it's hard, it's always freeing. And I just find it very satisfying. And I particularly love doing that with people who are not just finding their personal truth, but also are trying to find a greater truth that's going to bring healing and just a more peaceful, better world. Um, so working with people who are in the social impact space, and that's the other thing, is that I've always really cared about social justice.
mhm.
And this happens to be the thing I'm good at. So I just wanted to do what I'm good at in a space that I care about. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, beautiful. Yeah, I can speak to that too, being that satisfying feeling of seeing somebody in their truth. Um, it's almost like you could see those deeper parts of the person, and then the thing happens.
Yeah.
And that's the beautiful unfolding of them knowing more of who they are.
Yeah.
Um, and you know, like my why, I feel like also really came from my lived experience through the professional world, maybe even academic experience, you know, through college. Because I I can't say that I would be able to name that social justice was important for me,
Hmm.
especially growing up. But once I started to become an educator, when I entered like the college and like moving away into different communities that I wasn't raised in, and then going through experiences in the professional world, as an educator, as a nonprofit leader, that's what really sparked my curiosity because things were happening to me
Yeah.
that were not good, that didn't feel good.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's what really prompted me to try and dig deeper because I needed to help myself
Yeah.
figure it out. And I think I associate a lot of that with how maybe wellness practitioners also might be coming into to practice because they healed themselves in some way
Yeah.
and it worked for them, and then it's like it becomes something that is shared, that they want to share and bring out to the world. So that's a big part of like my why is I lived through a lot of things and overcame it, and that's really where I found that um, through guiding, let's say, leaders or volunteers or young professionals that were looking to me for guidance, um, I didn't know I was coaching them
Yeah.
until I decided to get certified as a coach. So, you know, that term in this industry of coaching is like, okay, so there's a thing now that I can associate like my life's work with now, and it can manifest in that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That really resonates with me. Um, you know, the thing that has become central in my work is courage to do hard things that matter. And I think the reason for that is because of my own journey, of just really being afraid, feeling afraid, for a lot of different reasons. Um, and growing up, you know, having anxiety, feeling that, having depression and all of that, and finding that I had to find my own medicine
Mm.
to be able to
Mhm.
have the life, the sense of purpose, the sense of meaning that I really need. Um, and I think, you know, and seeing that it wasn't just about the choices that I was making, that there's a whole world out there, that sets us up, um, to, you know, and just and wanting to do something about that. You know, not
Mhm.
wanting other people to have to learn the hard way.
Mm.
You know,
Right.
and yeah, so very much like my the reason I coach is very much connected as well to my own journey of like what it took me, what it and it can what it continues to take me. It's not like I'm fully baked or anything. It's like what it has taken me to just be okay in myself, you
Yeah.
know, and what it continues to take me for that. And just seeing, having gone through that journey, I see so clearly how so much of what we struggle with is, you know, just not being able to be human.
Mhm.
That the world we live in is there's not space to be human, and wanting to work at all the different levels, the inner level, the level that's inside us, and the level and supporting people who are working to create the shifts systemically as
Right.
well.
Right. So we could speak to how this healing shows up for us or how it has.
Mhm.
Um, can you say that when you work with somebody or an organization, how does the healing show up then for you?
Mm. Um, the way that the healing, I think, a lot of times shows up is it's in the pauses and in the spaces, and it's
Mm,
in the very capacity. It's in that first step of just slowing down, because so many, and I feel this in myself too. The wonderful thing about coaching is that it's become my job to slow down, right?
yeah.
And so it holds me in that practice. But so often I am feeling like I'm just going a million miles an hour, and so I have to slow myself down to be coach. And then my client comes in the room and they're going a million miles an hour, and just the magic that happens when they are able to take a breath and slow down and see what's really up for them, and what's going on a level deeper, you know um, that I think can be really healing, because you start to see how much resource you actually have
Mhm.
when you take the time to notice, right?
Yeah, yeah. I always find that it's so interesting. Maybe it's this like switch we have to do in our brain, but to think that so many answers come when we're quiet.
Yeah, yeah,
And that's the thing about a lot of change agents, and work those leaders who are just like really working really hard in a way that's like go, go, go. There's a lot
yeah,
of work to be done, so we got to go, 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 and then we kind of like lose sight of all that information that just
yeah,
passed.
yeah. And to the piece of being trauma informed, I think the thing is like that slowing down piece. I think the reason that a lot of times I didn't do it and other people don't do it is because when I slow down, I actually find it's not quiet. It's not quiet that I find, it's actually really noisy in there. Like my head's really noisy, my body's really noisy. Um, and I think that's where having a coach can be really helpful, you know,
Yeah.
having that space to really anchor in and be able to be with the noise, so that
Hmm.
we can kind of learn how to settle ourselves down. And yeah.
Yeah. And just having somebody, I often find the mirroring piece can be an important place to recognize where the pause needs to happen,
Yeah.
or that the information about the trauma needs to be present, is to have somebody reflect that back or actually mirror it in some sort of way.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, so let's talk a little bit about that. We touched on trauma, being trauma informed in that way. um let's step back a little bit and just from each of our perspectives. For you, Reva, does what is it? Let me just say, how do you define it for yourself? How do you define trauma
Yeah. Oh, how
from
do
your
I define
perspective?
trauma? Well, the thing I've heard that I find useful is like there's big T trauma and there's little T trauma,
Hmm.
right? And so little T trauma is what we're all walking around with. We're all recovering children, right?
Hmm.
And and we all have something to heal. And then there's big T trauma, which is where there's much bigger wounds to heal. There were it's not always a big event that happened, but there's something that really um, interrupted the healthy development in some way of a child growing up. And, it's not always children that get traumatized either. Um, but there was a real interruption or a break. And And sometimes it's a slow drip kind of thing. Sometimes it's not one event. Sometimes it's something that was really hard that happened every day after day, that 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 shaped the way the world shows up for a certain person.
Mhm.
Um, so um, so being able to pull those threads and see what's underneath all of that, um, is part of the work. But that's how I tend to think of trauma.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that all resonates with me as well. And I think that when I think about nature, because that's the tool that I'm really like harnessing in my approach, um, there's always going to be a need to go back into equilibrium,
Yeah.
right? Go back into balance.
Mhm.
Um, and so everything that you said, and what I realized is trauma is also like our emotions, it's an energy.
Yeah.
And so when you talk about something has been, um, what word did you use? It was like interrupted or taken away. I forget what you said, but so for me, it's like um, it's a fragment of our whole self
Yeah.
that suddenly left our bodies.
Yeah.
The traumatic event, whether it's one time or chronic or just a situation, it's knocking a piece of our spirit
Yeah.
out. And that's where the dissociation comes, is because there's pieces of us, they could be our child self, pieces of our child self, they're out over there, out of our wholeness, because that's where it's safer.
Yeah.
And energetically, we could work on where it is,
Mhm.
how it got there, and if the space is safe enough. And this is the work that is actually happening with me, is figuring out if this is safe to come back into again and
Yeah.
integrate with new tools.
Is it safe to come home? Yeah.
Yes.
Is it safe to come home? Absolutely. Because like the trauma, it's like it's energy that gets stuck in the body. It's like
Mm.
it's a really powerful emotion that just got stuck in the body, and everything else got built around it, right? The whole personality got built around it. Um, and I think um, one thing that's important to name is like that energy. It's like we can inherit it, right?
Right. Exactly.
Like, I can have, and I'm pretty sure I have had stuff that I just got by osmosis from my grandmother and grandfather who I never met, which was passed down to me through my parents. So um, all of that stuff that we don't even know we carry around that affects affects our energy. You know, the amount of resources that we spend on a subconscious level, holding and carrying that stuck pain, um, defending against feeling it, defending against working around it, all these ingenious things that we come up with without even realizing,
Mm.
strategies that we probably developed when 4 or 5 years old, that are really just like, we're genius in a way that
Yeah.
take so much energy, and so much of healing. I think it's about, like, I love what you're talking about. It's like something that some piece of us that got fragmented and taken away, and it's like a lot of this is about coming back home, which, as people who are working in the social justice, social impact space, that's what we're trying to create, right? We're trying to create a world of belonging and wholeness and home. And so if we're so much more able to do that for other people and for our communities if we actually feel at home in our own bodies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. And there's so much I want to like even pry into, but I think that we could touch on some of the other aspects of working with um, pieces of our clients, right? But for now, let's talk about being informed about that,
Yeah.
because there's a difference. We're saying, okay, this is how we define it, this is how we recognize it. That
Mhm.
could be a level of the informed, but just going back and saying, like, for you, then what does it look like? What does it mean to be a trauma informed coach?
Yeah. I think the biggest things for me are humility and respect, right? Like, so for me, I am a coach. I am trained in certain modalities around how to be with um, the parts of ourselves that are hurt. I'm comfortable with intense emotion and all of that stuff, but I'm not a therapist, right?
Hmm.
And so just and even if I were a therapist, like even if I was a trained therapist, I think just having some humility and respect for the ways that my clients show up and for the reasons they show up the way they do, right? Like if someone's showing up with a wall, I might be curious, like if somebody just shows up with all kinds of defenses and a wall, right? Like I might be curious about the wall, but I'm not going to try to take a sledgehammer to it, right?
Hmm.
That's not my job. I respect the wisdom of whatever strategies someone has developed to cope with life. And and I think a lot of times in coaching spaces, um, and I think this is changing, but like kind of old school approaches to coaching, it's just like, oh, there's a wall, let me break it down. Or there's this idea that the coach knows better, right? Like, I'm going to tell you what you need to do. All these, like, you have all these self-limiting beliefs, and you just need to cut that out. You need to manifest your destiny. Like people are like as if someone is just making choices, right?
Hmm.
Um, People are making choices, but it's more complicated than that, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. The idea that, like, there are some realities that you can't make a choice.
Yes.
Um, and I kind of feel like that's like leading us into we should probably mention, or at least dialogue through how that's important, particularly for um, coaches of color leading, and um, clients who are people of color, um, or in these areas of our society where the structures there make it so that there are either different choices or set up so that you don't have a choice.
Yeah.
And I wanted to see if we could at least talk about this term that you had brought up earlier with me on a call. We're talking about trauma informed, but there's also a piece about being oppression informed.
Mhm.
Can you talk about what that term is and what that is for you?
Yeah. I think when I say oppression informed, what I mean is understanding, and I think this is a through line, this is similar to what comes up for me with being trauma informed, understanding what individual choice is about, right? And I've seen this in the coaching space a lot of times. There's just so much focus on individual choices.
Hmm.
I do believe individuals have choices. Um, and I do believe there's always room for growth, but that individual exists in a context.
Hmm.
That individual exists in a family context that may include trauma, and it involves they exist in a systemic context that definitely includes oppression. And so having an approach that's just focused on, you know, that's only focused on the individual and is clueless about the system of oppression. I mean,
Hmm.
it's just clueless and it's not helpful. And what you end up doing is you end up um, putting um, putting responsibility on the wrong person, right? Like, so to give you a clear example, like, one of the things I've experienced in my life is the feeling of being excluded. Right? And I grew up in a place that was like, I was like the only person with my particular skin tone around. Like, I was the only brown person, and then people did not know what an Indian girl was. They did not know where my family came from. They didn't understand that you had to get on a plane and cross an ocean. It was like the idea that it's not driving distance, right? Like, this was the 80s, Virginia. Okay, so and so that feeling of being excluded was just my reality, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if I were to work with a coach who did not understand the realities of what it might mean for a brown girl growing up around a bunch of white people, in a time and place that was racist, that they might just put that on me. A coach might say, well, how are you just creating that for yourself? What are your limiting beliefs there? When for me, what has ultimately been healing is someone saying, yeah, what you experienced was real, right? What you experienced was real. And the way that you dealt with that was as good as you could do at that time. Like, all these strategies that you have, like all the strategies that I had, which mine were like withdrawing and, I was a hot mess, right?
Yeah.
Right. Like, all these things that I did to cope, and to strategize, to, in my being, felt like just to survive and just to be okay. They were the best I could do. They were smart in a lot of ways. They weren't working for me anymore, and they were holding me back. And it helped to have people who could help me see that. But to say that somehow I had, but I think that it's important to just see it as more complex than just these were choices I was making, right? Is that making sense?
Yeah, I almost want to say the humility that I hear you talk about is to be able to be fully seen and heard when you say I was excluded.
Yeah.
That there are more pieces to that story than having beliefs that you were excluded
Yeah. Yeah.
that are beyond like you in that circumstance there, because there are structures in the external world
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
excluding you.
Yeah, it's like, am I able to fully meet somebody in their experience, even if it's an experience I haven't had myself? Can I meet them there and just see that it is real, and do that to the extent that I can be useful to them,
Yeah.
right? And if I don't understand how systemic oppression works in this country, then my client's just going to have to spend a lot of time teaching me,
Right.
overcoming my denial or whatever stuff I have coming up around it, right? That's too much work for someone
Well
who's
then
already deal with, you know?
and yeah, and it's not, to me it's the client session,
Yeah. Yeah.
not mine to be educated about what's going on there.
Yeah.
um so those are like really great points. And you know what I want to say also to that is, um it often causes more harm
Yes.
if we don't do the work to really understand, if we don't come from the same maybe lived experience or community that our clients come from, to maybe have that cultural awareness, we could cause more harm. We don't have to come from the same lived experience or similar experience from our clients, it helps to resonate and to, I feel like, attune a little bit more as
Mhm.
we begin relationship. But that's where the importance of us doing our work to understand all the parts and all the components that may be affecting a human,
Yeah.
in their wellness, in their leadership. So I feel like what I've heard too is what happens when we're not trauma informed is
Yeah.
it could cause a lot more harm.
Yeah.
How do we work with that? As coaches, there's always constant work for us to do.
Yeah.
I could speak to the fact that, like, sometimes when it feels like I may be a little bit further away from the awareness, I'll let them know that.
Yeah. Mhm.
And this is also a place of being very transparent, um, and asking open questions and curiosity without taking the power away from them in their session.
Yeah.
And even just pulling back and saying, like, okay, look, I'm going to take that and I'm going to do my work outside of session
Yeah.
to see where that is for me, and my growth and my learning needs to happen, but I'm still here for you.
Yeah.
And the other piece I wanted to bring in, and I want to also hear from your perspective how you work with that, but looking at the the whatever it is that is being brought up, whatever is I'm working on, what we're working on together in session. I love that I was guided in my training around, saying, you don't have to give me any details about
Mhm.
what's going on. You could say as much or as little as you need. It's not my job to pay attention to the details. I'm focused on the impact this is having on you.
Yeah.
And what I'm really listening for is the emotional impact, the
Yeah.
behavioral response, and working with that energy. And so I don't need to know who said what or what happened. It's like these things are impacting you this way, and working from that lens of, I want to associate it as like the energetic story there.
Yeah. 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 I think I love that. Um, um, you know, people can still maintain their sense of boundaries and privacy. They don't need to. They're not there for me, right? Um,
Hmm.
um, and the thing that I think I try and do is it's like I'm not pushing, right? Like I'm meeting them, I'm not pushing, right? So it's the difference between like this, like they're here, so I'm here, right? Unless they want me to be over here, right? You know, but
Hmm.
I'm not pushing. I'm not bringing. I don't have an agenda that I'm trying to push. I don't have this idea of like, you know, um, this is a 6-month coaching engagement, and by June I need to have them here. I need to have you here. I don't have that, right? Or I
Right.
really need you to get this sorted out in the session because I'm tired of talking about, it's not, I'm not carrying that. And I have to say that I had to learn how to do that, how to let that stuff go. When earlier on in my training, it was like I was just sitting there in my coach's seat, um, worried about what my the client thinks of me. I was in my own imposter syndrome, right?
Mm,
So
hmm.
I was like,
Hmm.
oh, I have to prove myself. I have to like make sure I can get this person results, which was not helpful, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I need to have worked out all of that stuff so that I can just be there with my client and just be there with whatever's coming up, right? And
Yeah.
so that I'm not coming with an agenda that I have to use your healing as some sort of like prize that I'm trying to get. Right. That's not.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, so there's that. There's just attuning to the moment, and at the same time, while not pushing, like always having an invitation to go deeper, right?
Mhm.
I've had clients who it's like um, they don't necessarily, like some clients who are really, really resistant to feeling their feelings, right?
Mhm.
Like that, let's like, that's not something that I was raised to do. It's not something that I want to do. It's not what I'm here for. So I meet them there,
Yeah.
you know. Um,
Yeah.
and the invitation is always there. We can, there's ways we can work with that. Um, and invariably people come around, but it's not because I pushed them, right?
Right.
It's
Yeah.
because they felt it in themselves that there was something there for them to go deep.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, that whole process of not bringing your agenda into the session is so hard. It was hard for me.
Yeah.
Um, and what I want to say about that is because I had a lot of things that I needed healing on.
Yeah.
And to even recognize that when we bring our agendas into it is causing harm,
Yeah.
because then it becomes about you and not the client is what the surface level. And if you're not reflecting back on how sessions went and when you were triggered and when like something came up for you, and that work isn't being processed through, or your own development through that isn't being processed through, there's risk that we're going to bring that need into our sessions with our clients. And I want to say that, speaking again on sort of like the attunement and energetic way, is we often attract clients that are a lot like us.
Hmm.
And we have to determine, what is my story to hold through this process and to keep to my own experience and privacy so that I can be the best, and what is actually theirs, and my permission to guide through or work with.
Yeah.
So that's just a big piece that I had to realize too, is how ready am I to go deep
Yeah.
with someone, because I can't go deeper than I have gone with myself.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
It does. Yeah. 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 It helps to have traveled the territory a few times yourself. Yeah.
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 And that's what that goes back to, that piece of just having that informed, trauma informed piece, like
Hmm.
um oppressions, the systems of oppressions. If there's no experience with that or awareness of that, it kind of gets hard to attune
Yeah.
to student and or a client, and there's more work to be done there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
um
well, the thing I'll
yeah.
just add to that too is like, from my client's perspective, I think it's really important to be to know that it's okay to fire your coach and or therapist. Like it's okay. You can do it. If they're not listening to you, if they're not meeting you, then find some. It's like the thing I learned is like you have to be persistent in your search for your medicine. Like everybody's
Mm,
medicine is different. And it's like if you fire your coach, you're not necessarily declaring that they're a terrible coach, but if they're not your medicine,
yeah.
right? And it's like there's that, if there's something that you want and that you want to, that there's some kind of support that you're wanting, that you want to bring forward in your life, then you go after it. And you got to be willing to try people out and then say goodbye, you know?
Yeah. 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 And it's a relationship, right?
Yeah.
So there's definitely pieces around coaches saying that's not what you're needing right now, is not what I could provide for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And it's so important, right? Like, I do hold that intention of like, I have to be willing to refer out.
Yeah.
I have to be willing to do that. And And when I do that, it's not a statement on me not being good enough or them not being good enough. It's just, I think your medicine is elsewhere and you should go after it because it's worth it. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Great. Well, these have been really amazing points. Um, and I really hope that that kind of paints the picture of all this language. There's trauma is being used in many different ways, in many different approaches. But I think it was like really important for us as we had a conversation. I'm like, hey, we as coaches never really, as women coaches of color, haven't I haven't had a space really where it has been delved into in conversation. So I really appreciate you taking the time to really dig into that with me today, and um, just educating community, or really just invigorating some conversation amongst the coaching community, or folks that work with coaches, or have coaches, just to know what's out there,
Mm.
and what perspectives. Any last takeaways you want to mention, or points you want to mention before we close out?
I think it's just that last one, it okay, I'll say this. If I had known, the journey is long for me, the journey has been long for me of healing. And if I had known how long it would take, I might not have started it. But now looking back, I'm really glad that I did. Right. It was
Yeah.
worth it. It was worth it, the work. And it is rewarding. Right. And
Yeah.
so it's worth it to find the person or the thing or the practice that's going to be rewarding for you in that way, that's going to help you move along in your journey, because I mean, you will look back on it 10 years from now and be like, I'm so glad I didn't give up and that I started. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one. The the investment in self
Yes.
is worth it. Yeah. I guess what I want to leave with is, your trauma is your resilience. Your your experiences are your medicine. And I say that now, but it's like, again, echoing what you said, and it's a long journey of vulnerability. It's a courageous place to now say that you're ready to face those and transform them.
Yeah.
um, so that's the stuff that keeps me going, is to know and see and experience with someone and guide someone through maybe these like really dark shadows, and actually seeing how they're not these things to just put over there. They have worth and value just as much as a lot of the accomplishments and the light within your life exist. And going back to that nature piece, like, just balance. It's about balance, right? We need the dark and the light.
Yeah.
Good.
Thank you so
So,
much, Raynell. This was so fun.
yeah, I know we could go on forever, right? And so, I hope you all just keep in touch. Again, you can find me at renoconsultingsolutions.com, and on Instagram, follow me there at Hike It Out Coaching, and we'll have a lot of those ways to connect with us in the description of this video. And Reva?
Yes, and thank you. Please connect with me on LinkedIn, at linkedin.com/in/Reva Patworthan. And you can also find me at greatergoodcoaching.org.
Sweet. Well, lovely journey with you, Reva, and everyone else. Continue on, and we'll make it through the other side of this. We're getting close to this new world, right?
Yes.
Right.